What's up, my know-it-alls? Okay, so finally it's time for the next episode of one of my favorite new shows, and that's Halo. And so we're talking about episode 6. It's called Solace. This episode is great. I know I've been saying that a lot lately, but I'm telling you, the Halo show is really firing on all cylinders. It's very much... this episode isn't even as action-packed as the last one. But so much happens. You get all kinds of backstory. You see all kinds of new stuff. And you understand, I think, where the show is going. But wait, there's more. So you know what? Let's just roll right into it. Here comes Halo, Episode 6, Solace. Survivors from battle return to Reach. John confronts Dr. Halsey and the lies of his past. The new prisoner seems to know John better than he knows himself. Determined to understand more, John turns back to the mystery artifact, which shows him something truly startling. So I'm not about burying the lead, but this may very well be another amazing episode in line with last week. The only detriment that last week's episode had, and I still gave it a 10 out of 10, was the storyline with Soren and Kwan. And I will say this episode doesn't suffer from that. They totally dropped that storyline for this episode. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm positive we'll probably get back to it next time or whatever. But either way, this episode, again, amazing. And so it opens with John, and we see him still in the Spartan armor, all banged up and bloody and nasty looking, and he's just sitting there very melancholy, and he's looking, and he looks up at one point and he sees Halsey, and she's kind of packing some things, and she looks over at him, and he's looking, and you can tell his mind's working, and there's something going on, and we get kind of, then all of a sudden out of nowhere, a hand grabs his, and it's Kai, and the other Spartans, they're all there, and she's being held down, and they're trying to tranquilize her because of her injuries, and she's struggling and whatnot, and it definitely takes a Spartan to hold down a Spartan. And ultimately, John is kind of sitting there and just, he's very much floating in his own thoughts. We then cut over to Miranda, who's checking out Makee, who has some injuries and whatnot. And then ultimately you get, at some point or other, Chief stands up and he walks out and he looks for the captain. And while he's walking, he gets these flashes. You get these thoughts and remembrances, and he's really ruminating on this whole thing, and he clearly has ideas of what he wants to see happen. So cutting back to when they arrive at Reach, you get to see them unloading. They're unloading UNSC bodies and whatnot, and Captain Keyes is still very much of the mindset that John saved their lives. And so you then get this shot of Halsey, who goes into a section of her laboratory, and all of a sudden, John's there. So he goes and he looks, and you see him lock Halsey in her lab. And then he jams something in the door. And the whole time they're talking, Cortana shows up, and she's like, "What are you doing? Why did you lock Halsey in?" And it's interesting because the whole time I'm sitting here going, what's going on? And he's just rattling off facts. And apparently the guy who invented some of the systems in the ship and whatnot, the one thing he forgot to do was fix the UV decontamination system. Oh, yeah. And it's so funny because apparently Chief knows quite a bit. People don't realize information, especially when you're dealing with something like this Spartan setup. Information's power. All he just has, it's innocuous information, it's innocuous knowledge, but apparently the decontamination system is the only thing that doesn't have proper, it doesn't realize or register that someone's in there, and I guess the guy who invented the system, he learned it the hard way, he died. Rather gruesomely. So all of a sudden, he activates the system, and Halsey realizes, oh my goodness, she's stuck. And the Decon system basically is going to run a test, and the test, while she's in there, and she'll die. And so she's like, Master Chief, what are you doing? This and that. And he's like, what do you think I'm doing? We're gonna see once and for all. And so they're standing in front of the door, and and she's like, you need to let her out right now. And he's like, oh yeah, why don't you stop me? Make me do it. And she's like, I can't. He's like, oh yeah, take control of my body, this and that. And she's like, I can't do that. She's like, I wasn't built for that. I can only shut you down, but I can't actually I can't do what you think. And the countdown's going lower and lower and lower. It gets to 0. He manages to, he literally, so normally in sci-fi, you get the countdown, the classic trope. You saw it in Galaxy Quest, and you see it in everything ever. And it's like, get down to close to 1, and then you save the day. Nope. John's waiting, and he waits until it gets to 0, and then bam, he unlocks the thing, tosses Halsey out, and slams the door shut. He's looking at her, and he's like, don't thank me yet. I just wanted to see the limitations of your AI. He's the Master Chief for a reason, bro. Okay? He's a Master Chief for a reason. This guy's the guy. And Halsey's all like, ooh. Think about that for a second, though. He pushed to the limit, and he's like, oh yeah, no. I'm just not going to play your game. But I had to make sure I understood just how much control the AI actually had. Talk about a beast move, okay? Anyway, so we cut over to Makee, and she's being looked at and checked out and whatnot, and ultimately you get this meeting between the heads, or the council, if you will, and they're all checking this stuff out, and the council comes out flat out and says, yeah, we don't trust Master Chief. We don't trust any of this stuff. There's a significant problem here, and clearly someone has said something, because they're looking to potentially they're looking to blame somebody for the failure of what's happened. So then we go to an interrogation scene where Chief is meeting Makee for the first time, and they're talking, and they sit down, and she proceeds to tell him, we're the same. You and I are alike. And he's like, well, where they go? Where would they take the artifact? And she tells him that it's something in the Helios system, I believe. I got to double check that. But he ultimately says, look, that there's something definitely going on, and that you need to, that they would have taken it there. So then it erupts. We explode into a busy command center, and people are going around, and Keyes is like, I want to know where this thing is, and he's ordering people around and stuff. It's very exciting. So we cut to Master Chief, who is in the artifact room, and he's trying to understand what it is she knows. Makee, what does she know? And is she right? So then we leave that moment, we let that moment sit and rest in the air, and we come back to Halsey, who's being questioned by an attorney. And he's interviewing her for various and sundry reasons, and then we get a quick glimpse at Captain Keyes and Admiral, the Admiral, who are in these chairs, these little, like, reclining chair things. Yeah, that's right. I just tried to recline in my one chair. Weird, whatever. And and they have these little things on their forehead, and the thing on their forehead lets them be in the room, having a sort of getting a bird's eye view of this whole scenario, and they're essentially really worried that Halsey's going to ultimately divulge them and this and that. It's a show business. It's exactly what it is. Chief shows up at the door, and when Chief shows up at the door, they're like, I'm in the middle of an inquisition or questioning here, this and that. He's like, I need the room now. And you're like, you heard Master Chief, get out. So he does. The guy gets up and leaves. Dude sits down, and she looks at him and she says, ask your question. What's your thought? What's your question? And he proceeds to go, what tell me the truth. Tell me what happened. What happened? And she explains everything. She walks through the whole thing. But before she does that, we get a brief glimpse at Miranda, who walks in and sees Keyes and the Admiral, and she kind of is listening, and she proceeds to go into the same thing. And when she's there, her dad tells her, like, you're not authorized for this, and the Admiral's like, shut up. That's when Halsey tells him everything. Halsey tells Chief the whole story, specifically about the clones and how they were set to die at a certain point. It's really it's you see Halsey as having this. It's the classic warped mad scientist mentality that says the ends justify the means, the whole Star Trek adage, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and so she's like, this happened in order to save everyone, and you're the end result, and you're gonna be the end result, and everyone's gonna know that I was right, and we have to save it, this and that. She's trying to manipulate and control the situation, not realizing she really has no control at all, and that's fair. So then John's like, okay, yeah, he's like, yeah, I am gonna do this. I'm gonna do exactly what I'm supposed to do, but not with you. And he leaves. And at this point, Miranda wakes up and walks away from her father, and she's got tears in her eyes, and she's outside the door as Chief walks by in the hall, and she tries to tell him I'm sorry, and they exchange they have a moment, and he walks down the hall, and then he's just really, really upset. And at some point he starts to kind of hyperventilate, and he gets behind one of the little pillars, and he's like, and he's starting to breathe or whatever else. And then you cut a little further in, and we see a conversation between Master Chief and Kai 125, and he tells her the truth, and she's like, we're gonna tell the others, and he's like, when they're ready to hear it. And so he tells her, he's like, listen, I need you to get better because I'm gonna need you. And I'm like, okay, good. Okay, so he didn't ground her completely. He's going to work with her, and that's wonderful. Then we get this really interesting moment. Halsey walks into the Admiral. And we've seen them talk before in the same place, and she's overlooking the command center. The Admiral's overlooking the command center. Halsey walks in, and she's like, well, those theatrics went well, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Again, thinking she knows everything. And the Admiral's like, yeah, it's not theatrics. They want a scapegoat, so we have a solution. I'm taking you off the Spartan project, and I've set you up a nice little lab at a specific location. Those of you who've played the games, so again, remember, after the series got started, I went online on YouTube and watched all the cinematic movies that people put together from the cinemas, from the games. I've also played a couple of games in the past, but not much. Not enough to be really familiar with the overall story like this. I've literally played like one level of Halo Infinite. And like the one where he wakes up and Cortana's sort of getting sick and he has to go help do the thing, and that's about it. That's literally one level of that game have I played. And that was a test version or whatever. Anyway, so Halsey, this is apparently the place where in the game history, my understanding is this exact type of thing happened. So we're seeing by the way, we haven't fully reached, and I do think there's somewhat, like I said before, it's like Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel's following the comic books to a point, but it's its own version of the same story. So I think that's exactly what we're doing here. Halsey still has both of her arms. In the game, at a certain point, a much older Halsey with silver hair has one arm. I'm thinking we're eventually going to get to one-arm Halsey. And I believe that they're going to... So my belief is they're going to eventually step her out of the thing. And you're going to have a stretch of time where she's not involved. And down the road, one of these jump leaps in the future seasons, because I do believe we're going to get a time jump at some point in the future. Absolutely believe it. Mark my words right now. Eventually we're going to get a time jump, and you're going to get to see older Halsey, silver hair, possibly with the blue and white jacket from last time, and one arm. And she's in a secret base where everyone forgot she was, and she continues doing research of her own, because that's what happened in the games, and I believe they're going to do some variation on that same story. But at this point in time, the Admiral's like, yeah, I'm sending you there. They're getting their scapegoat, and your daughter, and someone more responsible rather, is going to take over your research. And she's like, Miranda? It's like, yeah, she's gonna get the promotion she should have gotten a long time ago that you denied her. And then she has Halsey taken away, and her clearances are revoked. And you're like, what? Yeah, it's insane. So anyway, Chief is also, by the way, he's really in rough shape. And so there's a brief moment where you cut to Miranda looking at Makee, and she tells her we're gonna get her some clothes and this and that, and she asks her, she's like, hey, there's some video, and she basically walks Makee through the scenario that Makee caused. She's like, one of our corvettes was attacked, or one of our ships was attacked by a corvette like yours. everybody was butchered, and we have one transmission with a female voice. I'm going to have it brought over so that you can ask me if my translation is correct. This is Makee who was talking. That's from the episode previous with all the little tentacle thingies, right? Okay. Anyway, so at the end of the day, Master Chief begins to feel a certain way, and he stalks over to a ship, sticks his arm in one of the medical things, and he's like, give me a quick scan or whatever. And then you find out he's not well, and the computer tells him, yeah, you need to go get help. But not before he sees a vision of Kwan, and Kwan's like, what are you doing? And he's like, what? And he looks around, he's losing it. For sure. So then we cut back to the command center, and at the command center, the Admiral and everybody else is still trying to look for this thing, and she asks Captain Keyes, have you found it? He's like, no, there's nothing there. The entire system's empty. There's a quick interjection where you see, what's-her-face? Kai 125 rejoins the Spartans, and they're all looking over some stuff, and then you see Miranda's first time she walks into her lab. And she goes to one of the main control centers, and she's trying to look up some blood work, and all of a sudden on the screen you see giant words, "See me." That's right. Halsey, even from her cell I say, quote unquote, even from her cell, manages to get a message out, and then she gets a visit with Miranda. And so as they're talking, she tells Miranda, look, I don't know what you expected from me. And it's the truth. What did you expect, man? She's like, I don't believe in this familial construct, that's a thing sciencey people say to sound like they're intelligent. But at the end of the day, there's nothing more scientific than the biology of family. So, and something you can actually quantify. Anyway. So a little bit later, and so after she leaves, Halsey calls her assistant. He comes over. She takes out a contact lens, and I'm assuming she scanned something from Miranda, probably her retinal scan or something that would allow her to have a conversation. Anyway, we then go to Miranda and Master Chief in the lab. It's the same lab, the two mithril mordrell. Every other word but what I'm looking for. The two Mjolnir armor Mark 1 and 2 are there as well. And ultimately she notices, she's like, this is the only thing that's unique to you and Makee. And it's a DNA marker in his genes. And she says, I'm not saying this is the Holy Grail, but this is the only thing you guys have unique. He said they're 2 in a billion. That's how remote this genetic marker is. Again, I think a lot of this speaks to our connection to the Forerunners, which is the people who created the Halo, or what they're calling the Halo. So then he comes and he has a conversation with Makee, and then midway through the conversation, he stumbles back and he starts to fall, and she starts describing what he's going through. And he's like, how do you know that? And she's like, because that's what I went through. And she explains to him, she used the stone to find the other stone. He begins to think to himself, aha. 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 So then we get back to Halsey, who's having a conversation, and all of a sudden you see her little teeny hollow thing. And what do you get? You get a tiny little Cortana. It's the same one we've seen in the games, the little teeny one in the little stand. So she's not full-blown emitting anymore, but she's on this little thing. It's a very reminiscent Easter egg of the games, because that's usually how we see her in the game, is that small. We see her about the size of a hot toy. I would love to see the Cortana hot toy that comes on the little holo display, especially if they can make it semi-transparent. Let's go, Hot Toys. Accept that challenge. So they have a conversation because, of course, Cortana found that she's like, I can give you a patch for the pinhole I made. And dude's super offended. He's like, there's no pinhole in my code. Whatever. Cortana's awesome, period. So then there's a conversation briefly between where he's talking to Miranda, telling her everything that Makee said. And she's like, are you sure? What if she's fooling you, this and that? And he's like, I got to try. And sure enough, he goes into the room and they connect. While they connect, Cortana tells Dr. Halsey this is happening, and you get to see this sequence where Halsey immediately brings up she brings up the stats of Makee, she brings up the stats of Chief, overlays them, they're the same. Halsey realizes immediately they're interconnected right now through a mental link. And sure enough, with this loud crescendo, the two of them find themselves in a landscape, a very unfamiliar landscape. And to either side of them, you see the land, goes up into a curve. They're on the habitat ring, which is the halo. Which is where people live. And they notice one another, and they come closer, and they understand fully this is something very, very different. And then they wake up, and we roll credits. Boom! There you go. Now you know. And if knowing is half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. Right? How stupid fast was that? But it's like the episode zips by. Anyway. I'm excited to see what they're doing. So what's the know-it-all index for this week? Yeah, man. I like where they're going. I like what they're doing in the show. It's a compelling story, and I don't feel like it's cheap. And I feel like you can still fold in future events that we know about from the games. There's so much story to open, and all they did was take a step back. And I believe they started the story just a hair earlier than the games did on purpose. And I think we're going to eventually get to a place where Master Chief is, like I said, he's going to move through time in terms of going to Cryosleep or whatever else. They're going to end this big giant mission. I'm actually not too worried about what's going on with Kwan and Soren at the moment. That whole storyline kind of was a little bit boring, to be honest. But I'm very, very much invested in what's happening at the moment. So, again, a lot of fun stuff. Dude, comment below. Let me know what you thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this thing. Especially, like I've been saying, if you're someone who's not super familiar with the games like I wasn't, I'd love to hear your take on it and be like, what's this mean? What's good this? Blah, blah. And there's nothing more fun than theory crafting. So, yeah, man. Let's, I can't wait. I can't wait to see the next one. Hopefully you'll stick around, all right? So like, subscribe, click the little bell icon to be notified when when new content drops. And yeah, man, I'll talk to you later. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.